Okay, hello everyone. We are from Group Pollos Hermanos. We'll be presenting about decommission of ori in Malaysia. I is Azam bin Azul Hisham, student ID 19001374. We're presenting about introduction. So for this project, we choose an ori as our preferred asset. So according to the definition from ISO 5500-2014, asset is classified as item entity that has potential or actual value to an organization. It can be tangible or intangible, financial or non-financial. But according to PS 55/2008, asset is a plant, machinery, property, buildings, vehicles, and other items that have a distinct value for the organization. But according to from the Inland Revenue Board of Malaysia, asset is a plant and machinery used for the purpose of a business and which qualifying expenditure that has been occurred. So all rig therefore can be classified as a physical asset because it has tangible asset involved in equipment and machinery. So next slide. So then we proceed to the decommission of asset. Decommission of asset have a few regarding terms. Decommission of an oil can be is a last process in an offshore oil and gas operation. Reasons might be varies, but it can be include but not limited to oil, the decreasing of an oil production, increasing of operation expenses, and the technical condition that pose a high hazard. Next slide. So this is the phases of life cycle of an oil. First, the discovery. Second is the exploration appraisal. Third is the development. Fourth is the production maturity, and fifth is the abandonment or decommission. So now I will pass to my next group.
Hi, I'm Shafizul. My ID is 19001274. I'm from PG. So for the processes involved in asset disposal, there are three main platform decommissioning strategy. The first one is to leave the oil rig in place. This way, the rig will be shut down properly, strip all equipment that involved in oil extraction, auto removal, and separation of wires, while the rest of the platform will be left intact. This strategy is considered as the cheapest strategy due to its easy chip planning, engineering, mobilization, and disposal expenses. The next strategy is partial removal of the rig. In this strategy, it involves the partial removal with items toppled in place, being disposed of on offshore or onshore or transported to another location. The rig's topside must be the first part that will be removed, and it costs a lot compared to the removal of the other parts of the platform. The next strategy is the entire removal of the rig. After confirming that all wells are plugged, materials from the platform are transferred to a variety of locations for reuse or recycling. No other elements of the platform would be below mudline by more than 4.5 meters. There is another alternative called Rigs to Reefs program. Marine creatures attach themselves to rigs underwater parts, converting them into artificial reefs. Steel structures on the rig are sturdy and long-lasting, which would provide protection for marine species in open waters where none previously existed. Thank you. I'll now pass to the next person.
Okay, thank you, Shafizul. My name is Muhammad Naufal, ID 1900-1243, and from Petroleum Geoscience. Okay, I will be representing about regulation imposed on the decommissioning of oil in Malaysia. As an overview, the practicality of decommissioning options can only be determined with a knowledge of the different nation legal frameworks. Malaysia's petroleum exploration and exploitation are normally governed by production sharing contracts, and that's why Malaysia is required to manage the process of decommissioning oil in active upstream infrastructure. Petronas released an overarching document named Petronas Procedures and Guidelines for Upstream Activities, shortened for PPGUA, in August 2000, which act as a framework for oil rig decommissioning in Malaysia, in which revision to August 2008 is the most recent version. Okay, next slide. Okay, in terms of legal framework, at the moment there is no specialized decommissioning legalization applicable to the oil and gas industry. Nevertheless, there are provisions in several acts, Malaysia's fundamental national laws, which decommissioning activities need to abide by, such as Section 6 of the Continental Shelf Act, Section 23 of the Economic Zone Act, and others. Apart from national legal, there's also international regulation will be regarded, such as International Maritime Organization guidelines and the United Nations Convention Law of the Sea. Okay, next slide. In terms of environmental framework, the PPUA revision to 2008 guidelines classified the information in three key phrases, which are pre-decommissioning, decommissioning execution, and lastly, post-decommissioning. Environmental issues have been addressed in each of the three phrases. Pre-decommissioning assessment required by an Environmental Management Plan (EMP) will be done in order to address pollution control, baseline research, chemical and waste inventory, and risk assessment. And lastly, post-environmental assessment undertook by PS contractor within 3 months following the completion of decommissioning activities need to be done in order to confirm that there are no detrimental effects on the surrounding marine and terrestrial environments. That's all from me. I'll pass it to my next group mate.
Thank you, Naufal. My name is Chang Shen, ID 19001547 from Mechanical Engineering. Today, I will be presenting about the cost involved in decommissioning of oil rig. So these are the 4 options that has been previously mentioned. Now that we are going to take a look at how much each option actually costs. Now, it is important to know that there is a lot of uncertainty about the cost for the reason, number 1, there's very few resources out there, and number 2, it really depends on the size of the oil rig. So for simplicity, we made an assumption of our oil rig is small size, single power platform, and 1 well platform shallow water structure. Now let's take a look at the abandonment budgeting. When we leave it in place, we only have the cost of plugging of wells and removal of conductor, which is cost around $76,000. Next, for the partial removers, we also have the plugging of wells as well as the removals of topside of the structure of the rig, material disposal, and transportation fee, which will sum up to about $1,856,000. Next. For the complete removal of the oil rig, we also have the plugging of wells, but this time we have removal of entire structure of the rig, and also material disposal and transportation fees, which will cost around $5,656,000. Next. For the rig to reef removal program, we have also the plugging of wells, but the removal of structure of the rig, and this can be classified into partial removal or complete removal. For partial removal, it costs around $1,576,000, and for complete removal, it costs around $5,076,000. Yes. Now let's take a look at the life cycle cost, because this is important in our financial planning. So what is the meaning of opportunity cost? When we collect money in the future, the money is actually worth less today. How much the money is worth less, it depends on our MARR. So for simplicity, we're going to assume our MARR at around 20%, and we're also going to assume that oil rig lasts around 20 years. Keep in mind there is uncertainty on this opportunity cost because the oil prices, natural disaster, and regulation is unpredictable. Next. So from the interest rate calculator for around 20% MARR, the present value given the future value of 20% for 20 years is 0.0261. Next. So what we need to do now is multiply every number by 0.0261, and this is the number that we use for present value abandonment budgeting. So for leaving it in place is $1,983.60. For partial removal is $48,441.60. For complete removal is $147,621.60. And for rig to reef removal, partial removal is $43,743.60. And for complete rig to reef removal is $135,093.60. Now let's take a look at the financial reporting. There's 3 financial reporting that we need to look at: is the income statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flow. Next. So for income statement, the decommissioning of an oil rig is subtracted from the operating expenditure. And the total revenue minus the cost of goods is the gross revenue. And after that, we minus OPEX, which will give us gross income. After that, which we minus tax and interest, which will give us net income. Next. The balance sheet shows the total asset and liabilities and equity of a company. So when we're decommissioning an oil rig, we use cash. So the cash is minus from the current asset in the balance sheet. Next. The statement of cash flow shows the inflow and outflow for the cash. Now, since oil rig is an operating activities, the cash is deducted from the cash flow from operation. The other aspect remain unchanged. Next. So that's all from me. I will pass my flow to Lutfi.
Hello, my name is Lutfi Hasif, 19001527, and I'll be presenting the managing risk. So the risk management process. So first, it requires a risk identification. Risk identification itself helps determine the risk that could potentially cause a hazard and a negative impact on the safety of the people, the surrounding of the environment, and the financial of the company. So these are the identified risks. The first is the falling objects in the incident. The second is the uncontrolled hazardous drilling fluids on the people. And the last is the unstable knockdown structure in terms of the safety of the people and the offshore platform. In terms of the environment risk that is identified, the first is the spillage disposal of drilling fluid in the ocean. The second is the heavy metal waste disposal. And lastly is the use of explosive during the decommission. When in terms of financial risk of the company, the damage to the equipment is one of the risks, and the second is the calculation error. The second process of the risk management process is the risk and qualification analysis. So basically, risk analysis assists determining the priority of the identified risk based on the magnitude and the consequences and the likelihood of it occurring. We can calculate the level of risk by multiplying the consequences by the likelihood of it happening. So based on the listed identified risk, by using the qualitative semi-quantitative risk analysis, I have put up the priority in terms of the level of risk, where it is the consequences and the likelihood is multiplied. Red basically means the level of priority, while the green is the least priority. And then lastly, the risk response, treatment, and risk control. The risk treatment itself includes identifying and controlling the risk in order to eliminate or reduce the overall negative impact to decrease the likelihood of it occurring. Basically, it includes avoiding the risk, change the likelihood of the occurrence, change the consequences, share the risk, and retain the risk. Based on the identified risk, there are multiple risk control and treatment that can be done. For example, in the use of explosion, since it is the most severe risk in the use of decommissioning. It is urgent and must be identify an alternative source. And throughout this process, it's known as a risk reduction. If not possible, then the risk must be retained, and the company must be financially responsible. The second is a falling objects incident, where it is also a high consequence, but with the use of safety hazard, we can decrease the likelihood of it happening, known as risk reduction. And the third is basically spill of drilling fluids in the ocean. By increasing the safety of the decommission procedure and the leakage of the pipelines, we can reduce the risk of it happening, known as risk reduction. And then the fourth is the unstable knockdown structure of the offshore. By increasing the work safety implementation, we can also reduce the risk. At the same time, we can also implement insurance with the use of risk transfer towards the workers. The fifth one is the damage of the reusable equipment, in which risk transfer is used and insurance company is also used based on the destroyed equipment. And then the sixth one is the waste metal disposal, where the mechanism to collect the waste of excess is improved and the risk reduction is achieved. And the seventh point is the uncontrolled fluids of the workplace, where the precaution is always taken in place, which reduce the likelihood of it happening, and basically falls under the risk reduction category. And the last part is human error through miscalculation. Basically, it means if we can reduce the calculation error, we can, at the same time, we can also retain the risk, since it rarely happens. Thank you. This is from Group Los Pollos Hermanos.